It's a new season of the Liz Wheeler Show. What this show won't be: boring, old, ineffectual commentary. Go tune into Fox if you want the generic political yammering that got us into this mess. Small assumptions allow big lies. So the Liz Wheeler Show will challenge everything. On this show, it's be based or our country dies. What does it mean to be based? Stay tuned. Hey everyone. Thanks for joining. This is a very special presentation of the Liz Wheeler Show. Today we're going live because there's a big brouhaha on X the past couple of days. Should pro-lifers vote for Donald Trump? Should pro-lifers not vote for Donald Trump? This is the question. We're going to address this today because it is a very important question, a very critical question. It's very simple, actually. I'm going to offer my 2 cents, as is Seth Dillon, who's going to join us shortly. I would argue, and I'm going to give you the reasons why, that pro-lifers and Christians have a moral duty to vote for Donald Trump. And I totally feel the people who are listening to this who disagree, who feel disappointed, disillusioned, even betrayed by Donald Trump's tweets. We're going to talk about all of this and more today on the Liz Wheeler Show. We are going to wait just a minute for other people to join because we just went live and we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to join in. It is good to see you. And we're going to read comments too. So go ahead and drop your comments in the chat box. We will get to as many of those as possible. Today's show is sponsored by First Cup Coffee. Go to firstcup.com. Use my promo code Liz to get 10% off your order. That's firstcup.com. Promo code Liz for 10% off your order. Because we believe in spiritual warfare here on this show, we begin each show with a prayer, if you will join me. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits that prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. All right, guys, I see more of you joining. We will get started here in just a minute. We're going to bring Seth Dillon on. Also, in a moment, once everybody has had a chance to join, it's good to see you. Make sure to let me know in the chat if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay, any comments that you have as we go along. We will be monitoring the chat box the whole time. We're also proud to have as a sponsor today, American Hartford Gold. In all the time that we've been alive, the US dollar has always been our primary currency. We've been able to count on it, but that may not be the case much longer. The US dollar is facing unprecedented inflation. Our politics, I don't need to tell you this, are getting increasingly unstable. And if that wasn't scary enough, our government has proposed to take total control over our money with a digital dollar. This is why it's never been more important to take control over your wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or of currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealers I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts, by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. American Hartford Gold, by the way, supports content just like this that's committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text my name, Liz, to 998899. All right, guys. Also, tomorrow evening, that would be Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be hosting Spaces right here on X where we're going to talk about this topic. So if you're in the chat box today, or if you have taken part in this discussion over the past couple of days on X, should pro-lifers support Donald Trump? Should pro-lifers refuse to vote for Donald Trump? Please join us for this X Spaces tomorrow at 8 p.m. We're going to create that event. It'll be on my X profile. You can set your notifications so you're reminded when we start that. We've extended an invitation to everyone who has taken part in this discussion on X. So we've extended an invitation to Lila Rose. She's confirmed that she will be present. We've extended an invitation to Ashley St. Clair. We've extended an invitation to people with a variety of viewpoints. Stay tuned as those people continue to confirm. I'm in the midst of texting everyone about this, but go ahead and just pop in if you want. Join us for that because we want to hear your opinion too. This is a very important topic of conversation. So before we bring Seth Dillon on the show, I want to give my 2 cents on this. So I totally understand the viewpoint of wanting Donald Trump to be an absolutist on life issues. I myself am an absolutist on life issues, as absolutist as as possibly can be. I believe in the dignity of life from the moment of conception until natural death. I think abortion should be illegal in our country from the moment of conception until birth. The entire thing should be completely illegal. So that's my viewpoint. And the reason that I'm telling you my viewpoint is because it's important context for what I'm about to say. I also am disappointed when Donald Trump tweets things like, my administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights. It's disappointing. It's discouraging, especially when we are nearly not even 3 months away from the election. But here's the thing. If you refuse to vote for Donald Trump because you don't like this tweet, and I don't like this tweet either, if you refuse to vote for Donald Trump, that is effectively a vote for Kamala Harris. And that is unacceptable. Kamala Harris avidly supports all abortions from the moment of conception all the way up to the moment of birth. And I know oftentimes people dismiss this talking point, oh, the moment of birth. Kamala Harris supports even gruesome late-term abortions for any reason. We cannot allow her to become president because of our unwillingness to vote for Donald Trump. This is simply, it is our moral duty as Christians to vote against Kamala Harris, even if this means that we analyze this election through the lens of the lesser of two evils. Which of these candidates will be more likely to protect the dignity of life than the other? The answer to that is obviously Donald Trump. The answer to how to prevent Kamala Harris, the most radically pro-abortion politician in our country, I would argue, is to elect Donald Trump. And so the statement that I make is not to sound hyperbolic. It's not to dismiss the feelings of disappointment, disillusionment, discouragement that many pro-lifers and Christians feel when Donald Trump makes statements like, my administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights. No, we'll talk about what that tweet actually means and what he's actually doing and whether Donald Trump is actually pro-life once we bring Seth Dillon on. But I just want to be very clear. If you refuse to vote for Donald Trump, then you are an active participant in the election of Kamala Harris, who supports abortions up to the moment of birth, the bloody death of unborn babies, innocent babies, for any reason whatsoever. And I know this to some sounds harsh, to some this sounds like a turnoff. I want to bring Seth Dillon in before we run down all of the drama that's happened over the last couple of days on Twitter. So Seth, you can enter. Hey, Seth, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
All right, Seth, I want to kind of run down what's happened on X. And I suppose it didn't even start on X. It started on Truth Social with Donald Trump posting, my administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights. So first of all, when you see this as a ardent pro-lifer yourself, what is your reaction to this?
Well, I commented on this when he first posted it. You know, I was kind of shocked, honestly, because reproductive rights is a euphemism for the right to abort your child. That's what it's a euphemism for. So it's crazy to see somebody who has stood for pro-life use language like that. I certainly don't think he should be using language like that. So my initial reaction was to think, well, he sounds like a pro-death Democrat when he talks like that. Like, why is he talking like that? And I understand that he's trying to appeal to more moderate voters. You know, a lot of these women who are wrestling with this issue, this is a really important issue for them. It's at the top of the list for a lot of people as the issue that they vote on. And he's trying to appeal to them. And I just feel like, you know, there are ways of going after votes that you can pursue without having to adopt language like that or make it sound like you're flip-flopping on an issue that you've previously stood firm on. You know, I remembered immediately, it came to my mind, his comments that he made at the March for Life, which was a profound moment when a president of the United States showed up at the March for Life and gave a very strong pro-life speech, talking about how all life is sacred and all life must be protected. He used language like that in that speech. This was January of 2020. So you go back a few years and he sounded very different. And of course, you know, the argument for why he's doing this is to gain more votes. And I just question personally whether that strategy is really prudent, because you do risk alienating the votes of a lot of people who don't want to hear him talk that way. And so does he stand to gain more than he stands to lose? That was the question that I raised in response to him saying that. But I do just take...
I think there's a couple of options, though. There's basically, some are accusing, some on the right are saying, oh, he's flip-flopped. He has become Kamala Harris. He is now a pro-abortion politician because he's using phrases like reproductive rights, which, as you said, is a euphemism for the left's abortion agenda. My opinion on it is that this is some almost boomer strategy where some strategist is telling him, well, you mean something different by reproductive rights than the left means by reproductive rights. So maybe you can trick some of those abortion supporters into voting for you if they think that you support reproductive rights. I personally think that's a really dumb tactic. I agree with you. I don't think that it will cause any woman who is pro-abortion as her primary issue or her primary way of deciding who to vote for. I don't think any of those women are going to vote for Donald Trump under any circumstances. So I don't think
they
that's
hate him for a million different reasons.
Right. And he's obviously pro-life. He was the most pro-life president of our lifetime, even though he tweets this. And I get that. And I know some people are going to say, well, he's not pro-life if he tweets this. Well, do actions speak louder than words?
Yeah, it's not just the one statement in isolation. He's made some other statements too. You had J.D. Vance who said that if a federal ban landed on his desk, would he veto it or would he sign it? Vance said that it would absolutely be vetoed. There was that comment, which it's a silly hypothetical anyway, because I don't think that bill would ever make it to his desk. And the proper answer to that would probably be, well, this issue has gone back to the states now, and the states need to decide that. So we're not going to talk about these hypotheticals. That would have been a better answer than saying I would veto this. And then you have his comments that he's made. He's made very critical comments about some of the bills that have been passed that put restrictions on abortion, heartbeat bills. Some of these the more restrictive legislation in states that have been protective of life. He's issued criticism of those laws and has also made comments about how he wants to make everybody happy. He wants to kind of find this middle ground where everybody's going to be happy. So you pull all of that together, and these are all recent comments. You pull all of that together, and it does. It sounds like he's really wavering on that issue. And so I understand why the pro-life movement objects that. They have every right to object to him talking like that. They have every right to apply some pressure to him. As voters in a representative democracy, we all have the right to demand certain things from our elected leadership. They are there. It's a representative democracy because they are our representatives. They're not the people who dictate to us what we should value and what we should believe or what we should say. We dictate to them what we think that they should say. And so I understand when voters feel the need to have their voices heard and communicate that and push back on stuff like this. But I do agree with you on a couple of things. I agree with you that he was a very, very pro-life president in the sense that he was pushing back on a lot of this stuff, that he appointed these judges that did get Roe overturned. Like I said, quoting him from his January 2020 speech, his language was much more pro-life back then at the time. Actions do speak louder than words. I don't expect that Trump is going to come in and all of a sudden be a radical pro-abortion Democrat on issues like this. I don't expect it. He's a better president than he is candidate, is really what it comes down to. When he's a candidate, he's trying to make sure everybody is wanting to vote for him. And when he's president, he can stand more on his actual values and principles that he actually holds to, or the things that he thinks would be good for the country. So there's all of that political angle there. But I do agree with you in the moral calculus, when you have to weigh the options and you look at, okay, there are people who are actually anti-Christian and pro-death on one side. And then you have Trump who was pro-life and has fought for freedom and for Christians and for our rights. He's very critical of the radical gender ideology stuff. He is opposed to them on all of those issues in the ways that have mattered in the past. There is a reasonable expectation that he will continue to be. And so when you have to choose between those two options, I think even if you're a pro-lifer who's dismayed by that language, the obvious choice is still that you vote for Trump over Harris. Yeah. So I agree with you that there's not really much of a moral dilemma there, other than the fact that there are people who, especially the activists, when you look at pro-life activists, this is their issue. Obviously, this is very important to them, and they want to use the influence that they have on candidates like this to make sure they're being represented by these candidates. And they're in a very tough spot because what they don't want to do is they don't want to feel like anybody is just entitled to their vote or can take their vote for granted, and that they actually don't have any influence over their representatives. And I think some of the frustration that you see coming from them stems from that. It stems from them feeling like there's no appeals being made to them. The appeals are being made to everyone else. And so they're left in this position like, at what point do we stand on this principle and say, no, you have to actually appeal to us and convince us to vote for you? Our votes need to be earned. And I think they have every right to say that. And they have every right to feel that. At the end of the day, even if he doesn't appeal to them, I still think it's the right thing to do to vote for him against the party of pro-death.
Yeah. And that the most prominent tweet, probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Lila Rose, the president of Live Action, created a firestorm on Twitter when she essentially said the pro-life vote needs to be earned, and that if you don't use pro-life language, then the pro-lifers shouldn't vote for Trump. I'm going to read her exact quote because I don't want to misquote her.
Yeah, she didn't say they shouldn't. That's not exactly what she said. It's close.
No, I'm going to read her exact quote here in just a second. I do want to make, before we get to her point though, I want to make a couple of comments on what you said. First of all, I think too, when you're talking about campaigning and politics, when a candidate is running in a primary, say a Republican is running in a Republican primary, they often portray themselves as the most conservative candidate because they're trying to appeal to just Republican voters. Same with Democrats. Democrats, when they're in their primary, they run to the left of maybe even where they are because they want to appeal to the leftists in their party. But then when the two nominees have been secured, they oftentimes in a general election run towards the center because now instead of trying to secure the Republican vote or the Democrat vote, they're trying to secure the independent vote. So I suspect that's also part of this strategy that President Trump is employing. Again, I disagree with the strategy. I disagree with trying to of being wishy-washy with your language on abortion. I disagree with trying to move to the center on this, but I suspect that that's part of it. The other thing for pro-lifers to think about is every other Republican president or even Republican presidential candidate ever. Let's just talk about recent history. We had Mitt Romney, we had John McCain, we had George Bush. None of these men were absolutists on pro-life issues. I wish they were because I am, but none of them were. They all believed in vitro fertilization. They all believed in exceptions for rape and incest, not absolutist pro-life positions. And yet pro-lifers were very happy to vote for all of them, I believe, because they were so much better than the Democrat that they were running against. And I would remind pro-lifers not to use a different standard when it comes to analyzing Trump. You don't have to like his language, and you should. It's your moral obligation to try to move him to the proper moral position verbally on abortion. But also, we've never had an absolutist president. So don't use a different standard this time. That, of course, brings us to Lila Rose's tweet. I want to read it exactly because I don't want to put any words in her mouth. This is the first one. She said, Trump Vance have recently said that Trump would veto a national ban on abortion. They support, quote, access to abortion pills, which are 60% of all abortions. They think it's California's right to permit abortion up until birth. But if states like Arizona ban most abortions, they, quote, go too far. Due to their increasingly pro-abortion position, Trump and Vance is stretching the lesser of two evils voting strategy to an untenable position. Without some indication that they will work to make our nation a safer place for preborn children, they're making it impossible for pro-life voters to support them. Being less passionate about killing babies than Harris and Walz is not enough. What's your reaction to that?
Well, she's making a strong statement, and what she's trying to do is move the candidates closer to her own views and position, which again, I think, she has every right to do in a representative democracy. I don't really find if she were actively going out there and telling people not to vote for Trump, it would be more objectionable than what she's said, which is that pro-lifers want to vote for a pro-life candidate, someone who stands for life. That's different. It's applying pressure without actually explicitly saying don't vote for him. She hasn't told people not to vote for Trump. Is there a specific place where she said something like that?
She did not say do not vote for Trump. I guess I would, when I'm reading this, I interpret it a little bit stronger than you articulated. I do interpret it as her saying pro-lifers, and she's not giving a direction. She's stating what she thinks should happen. They're making it impossible for pro-life voters to support them. She also had a second tweet that said, if you don't stand for pro-life principles, you don't get pro-life votes. She also had a video that she put out in response to all of this in which she said that pro-life votes are earned. No one owns the pro-life votes. That I think is true. Listen, I think Lila Rose has done incredible work in the pro-life movement. She's one of the most powerful voices. I consider her a dear friend. I strongly disagree with this position because I understand too what she's trying to do. She's trying to, in a sense, pull a power move against the Trump campaign saying, listen, don't take us for granted. If you want us to support you as much as we have in the past, then you need to represent our views. And I do think a different candidate, this kind of power move might work on. I don't think that this will work on Trump. And my concern is that it's not just Lila versus the Trump campaign, that when she's using hypothetical votes of the pro-life movement, those people are going to hear when they read this, they're going to hear, oh, if he's not absolutist pro-life, then it's okay for me not to vote for him. And even if hypothetically Lila changes her mind at the end and says, listen, we do have to vote for the lesser of two evils, I was just putting pressure on the campaign, some of those people may have already made their decision.
Yeah, and whether I can't speak to her intent because I don't know what her intent was with those statements beyond the fact that it wasn't explicitly said that people shouldn't vote for him. Um, again, I just think she's trying to apply that pressure, the pressure that comes from a voting bloc that has a value that they care about and that they want to see leaders representing them, especially leaders that in the past have and are now seem to be wavering on the issue. Um, Putting a check on that and trying to apply some pressure on that, I think that's within her rights. Whether it's a good strategy politically. I certainly don't think it's a good strategy to say that we shouldn't vote for Trump because then you get a much worse situation on your hands than if you do. But I don't think there's anything wrong with talking honestly about how pro-lifers feel about the whole situation and saying that it's very difficult for pro-lifers to get behind a candidate who's not talking like he's a pro-life candidate. He's talking like he's actually pro-abortion when he's saying my administration will be great for reproductive rights. I mean, I think it's just a given that pro-life activists are going to find that extremely objectionable, are going to say, hey, this is not okay. And if they say that's not okay, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily trying to organize against voting for him. They're trying to bring him back to a position that is at least more acceptable to them, where they feel better about it. And I think that's the right. I don't think that Trump should be, speaking myself as someone who's pro-life, and I agree with you that it should be unlawful everywhere at all times. Not it shouldn't be left to the states, but it is left to the states. And I think as a political strategy, probably the best thing to do would be to just simply say that and not come out with pro-abortion talking points, but just simply say that this is an issue that's left to the states. The states can decide it now, and just kind of stay out of it. There's no reason why that couldn't be the strategy or shouldn't be the strategy. Yeah. Calling on him to actually come out with very firm pro-life statements that could be that could potentially hurt his chances at getting elected, if you think that would destroy his chance of getting elected, isn't necessarily the right call. But having criticism for him for these comments, I think is perfectly fair. It's just a question. It's a debate over whether or not what she has said actually amounts to voter suppression, as she's been accused. And right. One of the problems I saw with the reaction. Yeah, one of the problems I saw with the reaction to Lila's commentary, which didn't strike me as unusual for a pro. It didn't strike me as outrageous for pro-life activists to be talking like that about someone who's making comments that they disagree with. But the reaction was to tell her, and I saw this everywhere. You had people saying, "You need to bend the knee. You need to shut up, and you need to bend the knee." And that kind of reaction, when the ultimatum is issued to the voter to say, this is who you must vote for, and you need to shut up and you can't do anything to try to influence them. If you do that, you're interfering with their chances at success, is to get it exactly backwards. It's tyranny, it's despotism when the voters are given an ultimatum like you either support me or we will crush you. You will die. We will destroy your reputation and we will destroy your organization if you stand in our way, if you criticize us, if you push back on us. That's tyranny. It's different when the ultimatum comes from the voters. As I was saying before, in a representative democracy, voters are well within their rights to say to the powers that be, you need to represent us. You need to represent our views. That is not the same. It's an ultimatum, sure, but it's the voters' ultimatum. It's the ultimatum of the people who the government is designed to represent. And so when we're electing people that we want to be representing us, it's perfectly acceptable for us to be suggesting or even pressuring them to actually adopt and positions or make statements that align with our views and values. There's nothing wrong with that. So to try to now, the appropriate response, in my view, is to try to persuade this person. If Lila has so much influence that by telling people, oh, we can't vote for Trump, he's not pro-life, if she actually came out and said that, which she hasn't explicitly said, but if she were to come out and say that, and she had the power to actually cost Trump the election with statements like that, then she's obviously a very influential person who should be persuaded to get on board with Trump. And I don't think attacking her character, assassinating her character and her organization is persuasive. It's punishment is what it is. It's trying to tell her that she needs to get in line or else. And that I don't think is healthy in the sense that, first of all, I think it's wrong morally, but also it's counterproductive because what you're doing is you're only driving away someone who you concede with your own concern has the power to actually influence the elective outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to be fair to everyone who has taken part in this discussion that's dominated X the last couple of days. And I want to read Ashley St. Clair's tweets verbatim. Don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. This is what Ashley St. Clair said in response to the tweets of Lila's that I read a moment ago. Ashley said the most prominent voice in the quote unquote pro-life movement is actively calling for voter suppression because she does not think Trump is pro-life enough. Let me be clear, Ashley says, there's nothing more evil than calling for voter suppression in the most consequential election in U.S. history. This woman and her organization have simultaneously taken millions of dollars that should have been used to give new mothers diapers, formula, and help to put on five-star luxury galas and pay their friends. They claim they can waste millions on flashy productions because their cause is, quote, educational. They are severely bad actors who do not deserve a platform, let alone million in donations. She then had a second tweet. This one I think was more viral than the first. She said, you could theoretically buy 56 million diapers with the $14 million in revenue wasted at Lila Rose's quote-unquote pro-life organization. With her $271,000 salary, you could buy 1 million diapers a year. But please tell me how much good their galas and Facebook ads are doing. So I certainly have thoughts about this. I mean, I agree with Ashley that pro-lifers should vote for Donald Trump. I think that that's just the rational argument. We can and should encourage him to be a fighter for life and not to use euphemistic language that reflects the less pro-abortion agenda. I do think Christians should vote for Donald Trump. I don't like this character assassination because, first of all, it's untrue.
You broke up a little bit. What'd you say? It's untrue, and then what?
It's untrue, this character assassination. And given that it's untrue, I mean, we can talk about sort of the strategy of it, but it's not true. And it really doesn't address the fundamental of what Lila was, I'll concede to you, insinuating. She didn't explicitly say that Christians and pro-lifers shouldn't vote for Trump, but she was insinuating that perhaps people shouldn't if Trump doesn't moderate his language on abortion, or I guess stop moderating his language on abortion. But I don't like this. What's your reaction?
Yeah, maybe you could summarize what Lila said as saying he is not earning the pro-life vote with how he's talking. That's essentially what she was saying, I think. Rather than saying don't vote for him. He's not currently earning it, you know. There's more that could be done to suggest to get us on board. So I mean, I love Ashley. I love Ashley. I lean on her for advice all the time. We're good friends. Doesn't mean I agree with her on everything. I do disagree with the tactic. Like I was saying before, I don't think that the appropriate response to somebody who's even if she were discouraging people from voting for Trump, I think, yeah, you can say, well, that's wrong. I don't think you should be discouraging that. I think if you're pro-life, you should be voting for Trump, and here's why. And you can lay out a case for why and argue the issues themselves and try to persuade Lila to adopt that viewpoint, which I think is perfectly reasonable. Because the thing I do agree with Ashley on very strongly is what I agree with you on, that the right thing to do when you're doing the moral calculus and trying to figure out which way we should vote, it's better to vote for Trump than the pro-death Democrats, no matter how you cut it. So I agree with that. I just don't agree with the attacks on Lila personally or the organization. Like the comments about the diapers and stuff like that. It's just the organization itself has a mission, it has a purpose. People are donating money to Live Action because Live Action creates these educational videos. They do a lot of reporting. They're trying to raise awareness about the issue and trying to expose abortion for what it is. And they do that more effectively than any other organization that does that type of work. So the donors are giving them money to do a specific job. They're not giving them money to provide diapers or supplies to pregnancy resource centers. So suggesting that they're doing something wrong by fulfilling their own mission rather than doing something else that you think they should do isn't fair to them. But ultimately, she's not wrong in the sense that that she's criticizing the strategy. I just think it should be gone about a different way. I think persuasion is better than punishment, and I think that someone whose voice is as valuable and influential as they seem to suggest that Lila's is, and I think it is valuable and influential. Someone like that should be persuaded to get on board. I don't think that amounts to persuasion. I think it would be much better to actually have a debate and engage her and say, hey, look, Lila, are you actually calling for people to not vote for Trump? Where do you really stand on whether we should vote for Trump? And let's have a conversation about why I think Trump is the better candidate if you're actually pro-life. That could be a really, I think, fruitful discussion if we had that discussion.
That's what we're going to do tomorrow. That's what we're going to do tomorrow.
It devolved a little bit.
8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
Lila's agreed to come
But-
on. I extended an invitation to Ashley. I hope she joins. Others are
Yeah, well,
invited
one thing,
as well.
let me just say one more thing about
Sure.
Ashley. What I do appreciate is the passion, because this is an
Yeah.
important election. I appreciate the passion. I think it's good that there are people who are really fired up, who care, and they don't want to see this. They don't want to see this election lost. But I will say, on the heels of that, one of the reasons I think Trump shouldn't be making these pro-abortion statements and deserve some criticism for them is because I think that makes it more likely he'll lose. I think he loses more than he gains by adopting that kind of language and talking that way. And so if we're really concerned about, if it really is this serious of an issue where we have to make sure that we win this election, then we should be concerned about what his political strategy is there. And we should be providing some checks to that and saying, no, look, we think you should be talking this way about these issues. I think if winning is the goal, then you certainly don't want to alienate a very large voting bloc, and you don't want to be attacking personally people who have influence over that voting bloc. I think that's counterproductive. So on that, we would disagree, but we do agree on the very fundamental thing that Trump is the right candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, actually, that Trump should move, obviously, to the right. I mean, like I said, I'm as absolutist on pro-life issues as you can be, and I want my political candidates to be that way, too, and I will do everything that I can to push them towards that if they are getting it all, if they're waffling at all. I would echo what you said about Ashley. She's a net positive for the conservative movement. I'm glad that her voice has joined in just in the last couple of years. It's been great. I enjoy all of her tweets. I don't think she's wrong to call out Lila's position, because I do think, as you said, I do think Lila's influential enough that people listen to her advice when it comes to how to react to politics, the politics of abortion. And so I think that it's a discussion that should be had. That's actually what's kind of interesting about this discussion is all these different people who are taking part in this discussion. Nobody's 100% right. Nobody's 100% wrong. I will say, someone in the chat is asking, how is Ashley's accusation about live action untrue? And I will say, well, if you take an organization whose mission is to create educational media, that's what Live Action's mission is. So they do undercover journalism. They've exposed Planned Parenthood for accepting racial donations. They've exposed Planned Parenthood for covering up the sex abuse of minor and sex trafficking, in addition to talking to former abortionists, creating educational materials that go in public schools where kids are being indoctrinated. They obviously, I don't need to give the resume of Live Action. They have been an extremely positive influence over cultural thought on abortion in the United States here. But if you're talking about their overall impact and you're pretending that they're not doing what true pro-lifers should do because they're not buying diapers when that's not part of their mission, that's, in my opinion, disingenuous. It would be like talking to a pediatric oncologist and being like, why do you not care about all the men dropping dead of heart attacks? Because you spend all your time working on cancer for children and you're ignoring all of these men who are dropping dead of heart attacks. Every person doesn't have time to address every aspect of everything. People have expertise, niches, specialties, and that's, in my opinion, a disingenuous accusation to pretend like Live Action is not doing anything because they're not specifically buying diapers when they're not that's not part of their mission
and
statement.
other people,
that's the part that I say I don't like. I think character assassinations last a lot longer than just a tweet on X. This is going to follow Lila for a while.
Yeah, well, there are people too that were chiming in and suggesting that that it's well, the word grifter was used. A lot of people are using that word and suggesting that the pro-lifers that are running this movement, really the reason they want Harris to win is because they want to continue to fundraise and live lavish lifestyles, and that this issue, as long as it remains a battle, is very profitable for them, and so they want to actually see things get worse rather than better. And that's not a very charitable way of looking. I know a lot of people in this movement. I know Lila. I know a lot of other people in this movement. I care about this issue very much myself. Yeah. I would like to see abortion become not just unlawful, but unthinkable. And I know that a lot of the people at the helms of these organizations in the pro-life movement and running these crisis pregnancy resource centers are absolutely dedicated to that goal. They want to abolish abortion. And if that could be achieved and these organizations no longer needed to exist, the people that are running them would feel like that was a massive victory, and they would move on to do something else important with their lives. I reject that characterization of them as being in it for the money or in it for the fame or something like that. Certainly, I'm cynical of people's motives in a lot of cases. I try not to judge people's hearts. You have to judge their actions and what they're actually doing. I don't like to jump to conclusions about what people are what's actually motivating people when they're involved in causes like this. But I do. But the people that I know their hearts, and I know that they would love to see abortion abolished, and that would be a tremendous victory. They love their children. They want to see more children born rather than killed. And that is the motivation behind this movement. And so you can have a discussion about whether or not Trump should be elected without impugning the motives of the people that are involved in the pro-life movement. And including, by the way, the motive of Lila herself when she makes comments about Trump, because it's not clear to me from the statements that she's made that she's trying to discourage people from voting for him so much as she's trying to get him to come around on this issue and apply some pressure to him. Which, again, I think she has a right to do. And whether she's right to apply the pressure in the way that she's doing it and with the statements that she's making is a perfectly reasonable discussion to have. We can have a debate about whether Lila's strategy is the right one. But whether Lila is a good person or whether these organizations are fraudulent, that's totally different. And part of that, I think, is just the passion and the emotion that's involved in people really caring about this election.
Yeah. I think that's a good analysis. Like I said, that's why it's somewhat of an interesting discussion. It's certainly an important discussion to be had. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to keep going here. We'll talk to you hopefully again soon as we continue to fight for life and fight for victory against the Democrats in this election. So I appreciate you joining today.
Thank you.
Just to summarize this, my 2 cents on this debate is that it's very simple. You can feel demoralized. You can feel discouraged. You can even feel betrayed by President Trump's words when he says that his administration is going to stand up for reproductive rights, or when he has J.D. Vance say that he will veto an abortion ban should it cross his desk. I'm not sure I even believe that. If the hypothetical, Seth was right about this, the hypothetical idea that Congress would pass an abortion ban is so wildly unrealistic given what squishes we have in Congress that the premise should probably just be dismissed. JD shouldn't have fallen into the trap of the mainstream media and even answering that question directly like that. But I'm not sure I even believe if that pro-life legislation, an abortion ban, was on Trump's desk, I kind of think he would sign it. So just basing that prediction on his actions and not based on his words. So I think it's a moral imperative of Christians to vote for Donald Trump, even if you don't like what he has to say in regards to this tweet or to JD Vance's statement. He is, without question, inarguably better on protecting the dignity of life than Kamala Harris, who believes in all abortions up until the moment of birth, including bloody, gruesome late-term abortions. It shouldn't even be a question. We as Christians or as pro-lifers, we are not so fortunate enough to have candidates that are as absolutist as we are. And we should always encourage those candidates to be more absolutist, but we shouldn't refuse to vote because the absolutist candidate isn't the nominee. We have to be very logical, very rational-minded about this, look at this and say, okay, which is either the lesser of two evils, or which candidate is most likely to protect the dignity of life the best? And the answer to that is obviously Trump. Like I said, we're going to have an X Spaces tomorrow night. That would be Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Lila Rose is confirmed she will attend. We have invitations extended to other people who have taken part in this discussion. I hope everyone joins here. I mean, this is a time to discuss what Lila actually meant, the implications of what she said, Trump's strategy moving to the middle, at least verbally, on abortion, how we as Christians should view this election, how we should analyze each candidate, and what's the proper mechanism if we have a disagreement among people in our own party, and if we have a moment or a policy on which we think that our presidential nominee is not representing our viewpoints. This is a very important discussion to have. Also, guys, the most interesting interview I have for you coming up on YouTube this afternoon. Go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. One of the most fun interviews that I've ever done. You're not even going to have heard of this guy, but after you listen to this interview, I promise you're going to go follow him on X because he is fantastic. Go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler to hear that interview. One of my favorites of all time. And thank you. I'm going to check the questions real quick before we go. Okay. Oh, I appreciate everybody weighing in here. Theo says, I think Lila needs to be clear and transparent about where her donation money is going. Whether it's actual pro-life issues or parties and gala is very important. Okay, so this is, I think, a misrepresentation. Anybody who's familiar with the structure of a nonprofit knows that a nonprofit is run on donations. And I'm not speaking for Lila or Live Action here. I'm just telling you what I know about nonprofits. Nonprofits are run by donors. Donors don't just get online and donate or send you a check in the mail. Sometimes they do, but most often nonprofits, whether this is a pregnancy resource center, whether this is a media educational pro-life organization like Live Action, they hold fundraising galas where people who are likely to be donors are invited. They're invited for a dinner. They're invited to listen to speakers that talk about the mission of the organization and the importance of the organization's work, and then ask for donations. And the majority of donations that go to nonprofits come from these fundraising galas. So it's a little disingenuous to act like she's using, I mean, it's just outright false, actually, to act like she's using money to fund lavish parties that have nothing to do with the mission of her organization. I challenge you, actually, any nonprofit out there that you support, that you think is on the up and up, look it up. They have fundraising galas because that's how nonprofits work. So I don't think there's any outstanding questions about that. I think that this is a dishonest accusation to begin with. That's an attempt to assassinate Lila's character instead of challenging the tweets in which she insinuated that maybe pro-lifers shouldn't vote for Trump. Go after that premise of the tweet as passionately as you want. I certainly strongly disagree with Lila on that. But to assault her character with these accusations that she's a grifter, that she's stolen money, that she's paying her friends, that she's living the high life on the blood of aborted babies, that stuff's pretty nasty. And it's not just nasty in this moment. Regardless of what happens in this moment, those types of accusations typically follow people. And especially when they're untrue, it's really no different than what Christine Blasey Ford did to Kavanaugh. Instead of the left admitting that they didn't like Kavanaugh's jurisprudence on Roe v. Wade, they tried to come at him with a false character assassination, this accusation that he sexually assaulted a woman, which he did not do. We all acknowledge that was a despicable tactic by the left, so don't engage with it. Don't use the same tactic against someone within our own movement, within our own party, even if you disagree with her stance on whether pro-lifers should vote for Trump. Just engage with that specific premise. That's what I've been doing on Twitter. If you haven't been reading those tweets, go ahead, go over to my Twitter account and read them for yourself, because I strongly disagree. You know what I said the premise of this episode is: Christians have a moral duty to vote for Donald Trump, even though his language on abortion issues and life has been wishy-washy lately. That does not give us leave to refuse to vote for him, because a refusal to vote for Donald Trump means that we are actively complicit in electing Kamala Harris to the White House, which would be a tragedy for the dignity of all human life. Okay, thanks guys for being part of this live. I really appreciate it. We'll do it again soon. Make sure you go over to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler to catch that interview later on. All right, coming up in just a second, this is one of my favorite interviews of all times. I frankly was not expecting this to be so good. But remember 2 weeks ago when Kamala Harris proposed price controls on food producers? And even the Washington Post said, if your opponents are calling you a communist, maybe you shouldn't be proposing price controls. And a lot of this is kind of vague to people when they hear about supply chain, when they hear about price controls. I think people oftentimes dismiss it because not everyone knows how that will impact them in their personal lives. Well, the guest that I'm about to introduce you to works in this industry and lays out step by step exactly what is going to happen if Kamala Harris imposes these price controls. And let me tell you, my friends, if you're like me, and I think you are, this will give you the chills. Take a look. Okay, obviously the funniest headline that I've seen in a really long time was from the Washington Post. This is one of the most leftist organizations. Even they were criticizing Kamala Harris. They were like, if your opponents call you a communist, probably not a good idea to propose price controls. And that's a funny headline even for a conservative outlet, let alone the Washington Post. We hear it from them because Kamala Harris did, in fact, propose price controls. And people on X accuse me of being hyperbolic when I say that Kamala Harris is a Marxist. We have a very special guest joining us today to help break this down. He is a man who went absolutely viral, actually more viral than my video game tweet, guys. So that's real viral. His name is Robert Sterling. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we even get into your tweet that went viral, tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, and Liz, first of all, appreciate the invite here. It's a real privilege to be here with you and your audience. So I have a long background in M&A, which is kind of a fancy way of saying I help companies acquire other companies. I've done this for a few large companies. One of the large companies I've worked for in the past is an agriculture company called Cargill. It's actually America's largest privately held company based out of Minneapolis. So I worked there for several years doing deals in the protein industry, so the meat industry, as well as in the energy industry.
He has a pretty
So,
impressive background, guys, if you look into it, his business background. And the reason I bring this up, first of all, is not actually just to give you an opportunity to toot your own horn with your resume. It's because you know what you're talking about when it comes to price controls in the food industry specifically. Like I said, the point of that. Tell us exactly what's going to happen, step by step. What will be the implications to me and everybody else watching and listening to this if Kamala's price controls become a reality?
absolutely. And that's a great question to ask. The most important thing to realize for all of us is how fragile the food system is and the agriculture economy is in America. It almost, when you look at it, it almost feels like a miracle. When you step through the whole process of everything we have to do to get food from a farm onto shelves in a grocery store and from a store into our kitchen and our kitchen table, it's an incredible process. And if you start to adjust that in a way that's unnatural or in a way that distorts the economy, the ripple effects, like I tweeted about, are tremendous and not in a good way. So if you step through that process, if you look at imposing price controls in a grocery stores have very thin margins. Grocery stores don't make a whole lot of money. There's kind of this mental model on the left that grocery stores are making money hand over fist right now, especially after COVID. That is not the case. So when you look at all the money we're spending at the grocery store, when you look at grocery bills being up more than 20% over the past few years, that money is not translating into profit for the grocery stores. The reason why grocery stores have to charge more is their suppliers, who are the food producers, are also charging more. The reason why the food producers have to charge more is their costs have gone up. All the ingredients they use to produce their products have gone up. The cost of labor, which is a very significant cost of that supply chain, has also gone up significantly. Energy prices are more expensive. Every component that goes into manufacturing food has become significantly more expensive during the Biden administration. And so the ripple effect there is because producers have more cost, they have to charge more. If they don't charge more, they're not able to make a profit. They're literally not able to pay their suppliers and stay in business. So when you step back through, it's not, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, this is what's already happening, just to clarify. This is not even taking into account Kamala's hypothetical price controls. This is what we're experiencing today?
This is all right now. This is bad enough right now. If you impose price controls, what happens is the ripple effects work back from the grocery store all the way to the farm. So we go from the grocery store to the food producers, to the farmers, to the energy suppliers, all the way through the economy. Nobody is able to produce as part of the agricultural supply chain if you're not able to make money. And so what happens is you impose price controls at the grocery store, hypothetically, and the grocery stores are no longer able to produce products from the food producers because the food producers say, hey, we can't sell this to you at a price that's going to make sense for you. The grocery stores say, okay, we're not going to buy anything. What I said in the tweet is you would probably have to impose price controls for the food producers as well. And so basically the mandate, the price controls extend backwards through the supply chain. The food producers then have their own price controls. They're not able to produce because their costs aren't fixed. So their labor, their ingredients, their energy is also not fixed. So the food producers say, hey, we can't stay in business here. So basically the entire supply chain, which is really fragile, really delicate, starts to implode from the front of the chain, all the way through the back end of the chain. And the food system that we have in America, within probably just a few months, ceases to be able to operate. And we as consumers, so you as a mother, me as a father, we're not able to go to the grocery store and purchase food for our families. It really is that severe. It's that bad.
So you say at the beginning of your tweet, you go, people need to stop overreacting about Kamala's plan to reduce food inflation as if it would lead to communism, mass starvation, and the end of America. You then walk through exactly what you just told us verbally, and your very last point is actually communism, mass starvation, and the end of America quickly ensue. Hey, wait just a second there. Yeah. So it's not hyperbolic to say that we're going to be waiting in food lines. There's going to be probably violence because people are going to have a food shortage if Kamala's price controls became a reality.
Every bad consequence we can imagine is not bad enough. This would be horrific for our society. If you look at Soviet Russia, if you look at communist societies, the bread lines are the best we can hope for. Food riots are a real possibility when people are not able to feed their families. If you think about the most important thing in your life or in my life as a parent, it's providing for your family. It's feeding your family. If you're not able to do this most basic thing, and if society is not able to help us do this most basic task for our families, nothing else is going to matter. So when you have a situation where people aren't able to get food, one of the bad things is people start to fight over it. And you can see this when you look at war zones, when you look at natural disasters, when people are not able to get food at the grocery stores. When the food has to be delivered by the military, people start to fight over it. You look at Soviet Russia, and not only are people not able to get food, the elites, the members of the political class, they're not standing in the bread lines. So when you think about kind of the bifurcated society right now, when you think about the haves and the have-nots, when you think about all the benefits of being politically connected, that becomes even worse in a situation where food is limited, because the political elites are going to be able to get food for themselves. They're going to be able to feed their families. It's the ordinary people, especially people in the middle class and the working class, who are going to suffer. They're going to pay the highest cost here.
Yeah, and I think that the way that it's unique when you talk about supply chain, like the phrase supply chain, I think sounds very vague and nebulous to a lot of people. It doesn't sound like something that impacts us every day. But the way that the food supply chain is different than other supply chains is that it would take about 12 hours for people to start in violence over food. Like, you don't get your breakfast,
Yes.
your lunch, and your dinner one day and it's done. It's over.
That's it.
Right? I mean,
That's
you're not
exactly
going to die
it.
that first day, but like, you take hunger on steroids, multiply that by no end in sight, and this is immediate. It's not like, oh shoot, there's a car shortage because the manufacturers overseas, are facing these tariffs, blah, 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 whatever.
Exactly.
This is an immediate thing. Like, this is going to be,
This
would
is
be
an
exponential
immediate thing.
immediately.
This would be immediate.
That's
And
scary.
you, like you said, you might not starve immediately. You probably have a few days worth of food in your pantry. You're going to start panicking immediately, because you're going to think about the next trip to the grocery store. If you're like me and my family, we're going to the grocery store several times a week. We have 4 kids.
Yeah, same.
And so you think about the next trip to the grocery store, you are going to start panicking. And when you look at COVID, that's a really great example of how this can very quickly play out. Because even if you have enough food in your pantry, you're going to want to go to the grocery store because you think everybody else is going to the grocery store. So you basically have this game theory prisoner's dilemma situation where everybody is rushing to the grocery store and the shelves are going to clear out within 12 hours. And at that point,
so
if
crazy.
you're one of the people who was not able to make it there, or if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have the cash in your checking account to be able to buy groceries, you're kind of out of luck. And that's where everything turns into this zero-sum game. It's this dog-eat-dog world where all the spirit of cooperation in America, of supporting each other, of having each other's backs, a lot of that goes out the window when people feel like they're not able to get food for themselves and their families.
I
And
mean,
it's
that's human nature. I
terrifying
don't
to
even
think
blame
about.
people for that. That you get a survival instinct, and the first part of survival instinct is yourself and your loved ones, your spouse and your children. Like, that's actually as it
That's
should
exactly
be.
it.
But the implications are actually astonishing and frightening. And Kamala Harris, she's not stupid. She's an idiot for embracing Marxist ideology, but she's not stupid enough to think that these things that will happen won't happen. She just doesn't care about you and me. She knows that as an elitist, she'll be fine as we are fighting for. She'll be fine as we are fighting for bread in the streets. You would think also that the reality of this, and maybe this is why even the Washington Post was criticizing her, because they're trying to run cover for her. You would think that people who are swing voters, whether this is, the unicorn demographic of suburban white women, whether this is moms who think that Donald Trump's tweets are mean and don't want to vote for him because of that, whether this is people in the inner city, whether this is black voters, Hispanic families, whatever these demographics that are either sort of on the left or go back and forth, you'd think that this would hit home to them, because these are the people it's going to hurt the worst.
You would think so, and you would hope so. Honestly, though, I think a lot of people take this for granted. We're so used to going to the grocery store and not having to think about something. Like you said, the concept of a supply chain, it's a little bit nebulous. It sounds like a business school thing. It sounds like kind of a fake MBA, McKinsey concept. It is a very real, very critical thing that affects all of us on a day-to-day basis. Everything that we have on our grocery store shelves goes through this very lengthy process. And honestly, it doesn't start at the farm. It starts with components that go into farming. It starts with farming equipment. It starts with fertilizer, which is actually a byproduct of natural gas. So our farming, our agriculture industry depends on the energy industry. We need domestic energy production to be able to support our farmers so that our farmers can grow the food that ends up in our grocery stores and in our kitchen. But honestly, like you said, it seems like it should be more of an impactful issue than it is. And I think it's just because we're so used to, as Americans, not having to think about it. And honestly, we shouldn't have to think
and
about
also,
it. You as an American
media
should.
and
Go ahead.
politicians are so poor at explaining things. I said media and politicians are so poor at explaining things. Like, you and I sitting right here, what we need to do actually is come up with a different name for supply chain. Because even someone who's into politics, this is what I do. I live and breathe. Aside from being a mom and a wife, this is what I do. I do politics. Probably the same with you. And most of the people watching this show in supply chain, you're like, how does that exactly work? Like, remember when all those shipping container boats were outside of Los Angeles. Like, I remember taking off from LAX, looking out the window and seeing all these ships that were just like backed up. And you had this supply. They were like, it's the supply chain. Yeah. And I'm like, how does this actually work? Like, what is this? And I'm not the only one that feels that way, which means we need to come up with a better way to communicate this.
We absolutely need a better way. And it's so important for all of us here, whether it's somebody like you or even just a random guy like me on Twitter, to do everything we can to tell people how bad this is and how risky this is, because the consequences cannot be understated. This is severe for all of us. The risks here are catastrophic to think about. And honestly, we can't count on our politicians to take care of this because, like you said, with Kamala, she is so shameless here to be willing to even propose this. She knows how bad this would be. Like you said, she's not a dumb person. She's willing to do this to get political power. And it's frightening to think about that. So it's incumbent on all of us to say, hey, this is not good. This is actually extremely bad for all of us. And we have to make sure this never, ever happens in America, because it would be that bad for all of us, especially for the least of us in our society.
Yep. Amen to that. It's terrifying. Thank you so much, Robert Sterling, for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate your time.
Okay, guys, that's all I have for you today, except one last thing. Make sure you leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Just bring up that app, scroll down to the bottom, click 5 stars, write me a review, and on Monday, I will read all the 5-star reviews left for me on Apple Podcasts. You guys are the best. This has been a fun episode. It was fun going live with you. We will do it again very soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.